Around the world, as promised, a remnant remains, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Welcome to Remnant Podcast.
Marriage is supposed to be a light. It's supposed to be a light to the world. And when they see us living like they do, or communicating like they do, or not really portraying and showing the world this sacred, beautiful, precious, priceless piece of paradise that we call marriage, when we begin to not view it that way, well, of course they're not going to, but what happens by proxy is that now teenagers don't think it's something worth saving yourself for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we could say, well, that's because there's a bunch of other sayings that goes with culture that are terrible, like, drive it before you buy it, they want to, basically sleep together before they're married and not even call it fornication or anything, it's just an experimental phase. But what I'm saying is, so you want to go to a teenager and you want to say, hey man, save yourself for marriage. First of all, that's the only Bible way. But you want to be able to say it to them and them see a value in marriage that's worth saving themselves for, is what I'm saying. But people don't see a value in marriage anymore. Like, for what it really is. They maybe see some kind of value. But nowadays, they see it like, well, it makes economic sense. Or I ain't got to worry about eating out anymore. She'll cook for me. Or I ain't got to worry about cleaning my house. Or I ain't got to worry about money or whatever. And so they see it as a lot of the peripheral benefits that come along with it, but not for what it really is.
And another thing that I have noticed, I've seen a lot of people suggest it to their children. I've even seen people where they were asked to give some advice on what would you do different if you could go back and know what you know now. And their advice for what, their younger selves or even their children is, I wouldn't have gotten married so young. I would have waited till I was in my mid-30s, and that goes along with this. I've talked to you about this before, where this is just really, I remember whenever I was younger, this was sort of the mantra that you always heard, have no regrets, have no regrets. And that, what they meant when they said that was the theme of movies, that was the theme of sitcoms, that was the theme of just everything that was propaganda to my age group, teenager, young 20s, that sort of a thing. What they meant was do everything that you're given every opportunity to do. Because that's the only way to have no regrets.
And what they're really doing is piling up regrets.
It's all it's doing is giving you a list of regrets, And so when somebody says, well, I would have waited to get married till I was 30, again, that sort of gives this idea that I was held down once I got married, or, life was no longer about me and I should have had more me time. And, it's just so far, it's such an empty way of looking at marriage. And that's what they're telling their children. And that's what young people are hearing, along with this idea that, have no regrets, live life with no, no conviction, no holding anything back, no restraint is really it, and it's just so false. Like you said, it's just piling on the regrets.
That's kind of what I'm saying. And there's a lot of different ways that it comes at us, but there's a lot of cultural attacks, so to speak, on marriage. But kind of what I have been thinking about is what better thing could Christian men and women do in today's time than to, it's great to set your mind to restoring yourself to your first love, so to speak, of Christ, and to have an inner spiritual revival and all that kind of stuff. That's great. That's good. But what better could our country do than the people that are married, the believers, to say, I'm going to do everything that I can in my life to make my marriage be the fullness of what God intended marriage to be, because it's a gift. I mean, honestly, it's a gift. Like, even back when the COVID stuff was going around, and like everybody we knew got COVID there for a while, but everybody kind of got through it, and I was laying there like dying, and just to have you by my side, I was thinking earlier today about when Jesus sent the apostles out, and it said, and he began to send them out, and he sent them 2 by 2. That to have someone with you through life that's with you, that's on your side. Like even when you have had to go into surgery at the hospital or something and they're going to put you to sleep, it's like, I don't want to be there by myself,
right.
You're just, the ideal thing was I think that we could all have it. But you have to begin to take the right steps and begin to think about marriage in the right way. And even maybe people that have been together for a long time and they would say, well, our love just ain't what it once was. I'm not saying that, everybody can just have this perfect world, because I know there's a lot of tough cookies out there. But of all the things in your life on this side of eternity that's worth working on, that's a human thing that God gave, is marriage. Right. Now, of course, we want to be saved. We want to get that stuff right with the Lord. But I'm saying, other than that, like even putting career choices before marriage, what do you think about that?
Right. Oh, well, yeah. I think all things before.
Nothing before marriage.
Nothing before marriage. Yes, I think. I mean, if you there's nothing on the planet that you can say, well, but if I had that, even if my marriage wasn't great. But if I had that, life would be okay. There's just no thing. There is nothing. Right. And you could say, if I didn't have much of anything in this life, but if I did have a good marriage, you'd still feel like you had everything. There's nothing more important than a good marriage. Well,
so the reason I even brought that up is because another thing, I don't know if you remember, but early on in our marriage, we'd been married a year or two, or maybe 3. We sat down, we had conversations about this kind of stuff, and we didn't have near the understanding then that we have now. But we both agreed back then that if the answer was no, or I'm afraid to because of what it might do to us or whatever, if one of us had reserve, the answer was no.
Yeah.
And because we had talked about, where my career or whatever might take us, which honestly, I don't even know that you'd say I have a career. I've been self-employed for 21 years. And we've had different companies and businesses and stuff like that, small businesses. We've never made it rich or nothing. But even back then we was talking about if there's any opportunity that may come my way that's going to come at a cost or potential cost to the marriage, the answer was don't do it. Like even if it's, well, we're going to offer you this $150,000 job, but you'll got to move, and maybe, which you're not necessarily very close to your family. I mean, you're close to some of them, but space-wise, we're far away, and so this is not necessarily a good illustration for you and I. But if it was something that was going to take you away from your family, and maybe you was going to struggle with it or whatever, and it may put a burden on our marriage. I just mean,
and I will say that sort of, it's not really. It'll come across as though it's the counter to that, but it's not. It's just really to show the fullness of what's supposed to be, I think, the love there. Because there was also a time that we went through some things that we can get into another time. But you were really wanting to go this direction, and I was really worried about it. And just so unsettled, but basically with the Lord's help, I was able to say, sort of put those things to the side and say, listen, if this is where you want to go, then we'll go. And I'm with you. And so there's also that aspect of, you don't just say nonchalantly or without real heavy weight to it, well, my answer for this is no. You say that very cautiously because you don't jump to that and just say, well, one of us said the answer is no, so you're just supposed to fold. You don't say no unless you just really
the no
can't.
Cannot be a selfish no.
Yes.
It cannot be, or it doesn't work.
It's a worrisome no for our marriage maybe or something like that, but it can't just be, well, no, I don't want you to, and so you shouldn't. That's not the kind of no we're talking about.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's not the kind of no we're talking about. It wasn't, It can't be, it has to be in consideration of the marriage and the other, because, you can be like no, and the other person feels like, well, man, this is an irrational no, and you're robbing us of some good that we can have. And so you have to have communication. But at the end of the day, I think it would be good, that's all I'm saying, for people, Christians, to have a renewed understanding and respect and see the beauty is really all I'm trying to get at. I'm not even trying to be preachy about it, but to just stop and remember this great gift that we have. And if you'll do everything, first of all, to just see it for the true beauty that it is. in a way, one of the best things we can do to turn this culture around is, sure, I'm against LGBTQP whatevers, okay? The alphabet soup group.
Right.
I'm against all of that.
Right.
And one way is to just launch about everybody out there with a loudspeaker and say, if y'all don't repent and get saved, you're going to hell. That's one approach, is to go around and tell everybody how disgusting and wrong it is. But I tell you, and probably an equally effective or more effective approach would be to give them something that they wish they had that they don't, to show them something that's like, okay.
Because you can't get this outside of
You can, right.
this.
Yeah, that's
you
right.
know, you really
yes.
can't.
Not to mention there's things that camera will never show, that we, like our family life, the fact that we have 9 children, our whole history, our future, our eternity, being there in death, so many things, being there in sickness and in health, and all the things that the vows, for rich or for poor. There's things that the camera will never be able to capture, and I'll never be able to put into words. But if the world could look at Christian married couples and see, man, they are one and they are madly in love, and that's what I really want. That's what I really want. I want someone who loves me more than their own self. I want someone who's faithful. I want someone who wants to be with me for life. I want to have that relationship, that dynamic. I want the family, all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying, one of the great ways to minister to this kind of lost generation is actually just get ourselves right, the church and stuff, you know what I mean? Because I'm going on with something, but me and Alan was talking about something the other day about this LGBTQ stuff, and I just told him, I said, well, really, whenever Christian people started watching TV shows where there was a lot of fornication and adultery going on, they wasn't complaining about all that back then. But one thing led to another, you know what I'm saying? And so now it's like, if we're not going to stand up against, well, adultery is just as bad in a lot of ways as the LGBT stuff. Okay, I'm not saying completely, but when we allowed that stuff to enter our homes and nobody really stood up for it, well, what do you think was going to come in the next generation? Right. You've lost the sanctity of an intimate relationship along with the marriage and all that kind of stuff. So I rambled on with it. You want to say anything to bring us back to ground zero?
Well, this ain't going to bring us back to ground zero, and who knows how much of this will, edit out so that we can be in a normal time. But I do have a question for you, because you've said before how, and it is, marriage is an institution that is really Christian. I mean, it's a Christian thing. It comes from God, from the Bible, from the Christian Bible. And so my question is, why do all cultures that are not Christian partake in marriage? Well,
my answer would be a couple of reasons. One reason, I think, is that it's easy for us to have a view of history that's inaccurate. And what I do know for sure is that we'll say at least 99% of the world has heard of Jesus Christ, has probably even heard the gospel. Maybe today that number is waning because there's a lot less missionaries and all this kind of stuff. But the impact of missionaries cannot be overstated. It's easy for us to look at it 2,000 years.
So you think it's like tradition and mimicry almost? Like they're...
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, yes, they have took part of the Christian teaching and appreciated it and adopted that into their culture in a lot of ways. There's a lot of Christian pieces in cultures that wasn't probably there 4,500 years ago when Noah got off of the ark and the world started over or whatever. You can actually examine a culture and they have some practices and stuff that you would say, hey, that's biblical or that's Christian or whatever. And I imagine if you could go back and really see in history at what point did they adopt that. Missionaries have had a tremendous effect on planet Earth. I mean, it's amazing. You can look at, people always imagine these islands where people have never been discovered and stuff. There's people living. But that's not really the case. And so all I'm saying is, so that's number one. Number two, I think it's in the heart of man. In one sense and not the right sense necessarily. Sin is also in the heart of man. But to be sinned against is not. It hurts. And so love, the ability to fall in love, also is a gift. God gave mankind the gift to be able to fully experience love. And so what I'm saying is this. You meet someone, and y'all are friends, guy and a girl, 21 years old each. They naturally actually begin to care about each other. It just happens. And whether you want to look at love as something that was sown and grown or whatever, but love begins to set in. You can't force that, necessarily, but it happens. It's a gift given to mankind, and two people begin to fall in love. Now, one of the people may choose a route of sin or whatever, but it ends up hurting the one that's left behind, and they're like, that was terrible. And in their mind, immediately they're like, I want someone that'll spend their life with me. And so I'm saying, because true love exists, and because we are created in God's image, and because the law of God is in the consciousness of man. I mean, all cultures have absolute morality, and so if nothing else, I'm saying by the experience of the pain of the loss, it teaches them that's not right. You see what I'm saying? It's not right, and they say to themselves, I don't ever want to do anybody the way I was done, and so. It's in the heart of man to actually do it the right way. But sin is also in the heart of man, and so, they run into all kinds of problems.
Sort of like worship. Worship is in the heart of man.
Worship is in the heart of man. Every single human being that has ever been born ever worships something.
Right.
And even in the book of Ecclesiastes, in the King James Version, it's worded this way, that God hath placed the world in the heart of man. But the actual meaning there in the underlying Hebrew word is eternity, or I have heard the most literal way to translate it would be the vanishing, like this infinity, eternity, everlasting, that God has placed this stuff in the heart of man. And so man instinctively knows he has to train himself to not believe there's an afterlife. Like he believes it.
Yeah.
And
even hopes.
For it.
He even hopes he's wrong.
And the proof
in a
of
lot
that,
of ways.
I don't need any proof. The whole human race is the proof. Right. Think of all the religions that have come about by dealing with this natural understanding of there is an afterlife, there is a judgment or whatever. Well, the same, I think, to an extent with marriage. Like I said,
they may carry it out wrong or not see it for what it is, like worship, but marriage.
That's what I'm saying. They understand it at least on the most basic level.
Because it's in us.
Huh?
Because it's in us.
Because it's in us, and they may learn the value of it through pain. That's what I mean. On the most basic level, they may not learn the value of it through the imagery of the relationship of God and man and all this kind of stuff. They may not learn it from the perspective of, she was taken out of man, and Adam said, she's bone of my bone. They may not learn all that, but they do learn that through the hurt that's caused from the brokenness of something like that they're like, I don't want that. And so I think, I use this term evolves in a very different way than evolution, but it's something that's going to come naturally to man because it's in man to have that and to want that.
Right.
So
makes
sense. Yeah, that was a long rant.
Well, you've been thinking on it all day, and you're planning to preach about it.
And honestly, we didn't even touch.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I probably won't be able to get to all of it Sunday.
Right.
Because there was a lot of different things.
We may make this a part 1 and a part 2.
Yeah, and we could. Yeah, you can figure out where to slice it in there. But long story short, my summary, and then I'll leave you with the closeout, whatever you want to say. But my summary is that ultimately marriage is something more beautiful than I think even our current Christian world right now is getting that message out. We need to get that message out through living it, showing it, teaching it. The message that marriage is not a
powerful.
weight.
You're living it. It's powerful.
Yeah, living it is so powerful.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you can say a lot of things, but people judge your actions so much more. And for like we talk about this sometimes too. It's one thing to preach Christ. That's great. But if you can show them the joy of Christ too, that has an equal effect because they're like, that's what I want. That guy's at peace. He's happy.
Right.
And so show them the joy of marriage, show them the sanctity of marriage, and make it be something that this future generation will look at and be like, let's go back to that.
Right.
Let's find that. Let's get what they have, because God certainly blesses marriage, but he does not bless relationships outside of marriage. I'm talking about, of course, friendships. I'm not talking about that, but intimate relationships in any way, or really even, this is something else we've got away from too, but I really am done. You know, a guy and a girl living together, even if they're not sleeping together, it doesn't bode well. It creates a lot of problems. So anyway, yeah, show the culture the beauty of marriage again. Make it part of your life goal. All right, close this out with all right.
Well, with this being our inaugural podcast, let me explain this real fast. Forever. We've got Idea Bowl, and so you'll be seeing some episodes where we may not come to the table with an idea, but rather we're just going to pick something out of here, and that be what we talk about. So if you guys have any ideas that you'd like to see us talk about, feel free to leave a comment, or you can get a hold of us through the website, remnantpodcast.net, and there's a link on there for WhatsApp. You can directly chat with us or get a hold of us through the email.
Yes, and our intention is to try and direct most of the traffic through the website, not for any monetary gains. We don't make anything just for you going through the website, but because we live in an age of censorship, and some of what I just said even will not be received very well by some people, and I have seen many good people now be taken off of YouTube.
Right.
Because of that, we're just trying to kind of build it from the ground up in the right place. Now, that being said, we do want to load the audio to the different podcast things, you know, Spotify, iTunes, whatever.
Audible.
And Audible or whatever, but we're also going to be loading videos probably through YouTube and Odyssey, and maybe even another one, I don't know, but we want to give people as much access to it. And then also just a little plug is, if you're going to be watching this stuff, get Odyssey, because you can turn your phone off and stick it in your pocket and it keeps playing.
I love that.
I love it.
Every time somebody talks to you about Odyssey.
Because, I mean, YouTube, you got to pay for that.
Right.
And if you don't, you got to leave the screen on.
It is very
battery,
convenient.
It's super convenient. You can hit play on a video, turn the phone off, stick it in your pocket.
Right.
Ride down the road, listen to it or whatever. Saves battery life. Yeah. So I do like that a lot.
You should be like a salesman for Odyssey somehow.
Yeah. Well, I don't even.
A representative.
Hopefully they're good companies. You know, I'm just saying I like their tech. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah. So we're gonna get it out through all that, and so it's Remnant Podcast .net.
That's us.
And that's going to be up and going by the time we get this inaugural video uploaded.
That's the plan.
Okay. All right.
Good talk.
Yeah, good talk.